record. All right. And then so we should be going live so folks can find the video. I know that there's a number of people who are planning on joining us.
My daughter's found you.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, hello to Mary Virginia.
Thank you. Oh, she was an epic preacher's kid at Ardmore.
So that can mean a lot of things.
It does.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, my kids are they're living into the reputation, I think, All right, I see us on Facebook, so I know people are finding us and finding the video. And so, hey, welcome everybody to this next Conversations That Matter. These are a series of dialogues that we as Ardmore Baptist Church have with authors, writers, work that we find intriguing, work that causes really important dialogue, sometimes difficult dialogue, to rise up that we feel like we need to have. So we've covered a wide variety of topics. We've talked about dementia, immigration, racism, women in the Bible, a lot of topics that are necessary, that matter. Well, I am so privileged that this evening I get the chance to talk with somebody who is a friend of mine, and I truly mean that. Bill Ireland. Bill Ireland is the pastor of Norris Religious Fellowship in Norris, Tennessee. He has served churches in Mississippi, Kentucky, Louisiana, Georgia, and I think in North Carolina. A native of Mississippi, he did his undergrad work at Mississippi College, completed his MDiv and PhD at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. He's done additional study at Oxford and Georgetown University. Bill enjoys good books, good movies, and good conversation. And his wife, who many of you know and love, Jenny Bridges Ireland, serves as a hospice chaplain for Covenant Health. And they are the proud parents of a daughter, Mary Virginia, who is joining us tonight as well. And so we are here to talk about a book that Bill wrote. By no means, by the way, the only book that Bill has written. Bill also has a homiletical commentary on Philippians, and that's also worth getting as well. And Bill's book that we're talking about tonight, though, I know many of you have already read it, Driven, a Field Guide to the Wilderness. So Bill, thank you so much for joining us. It's good to see you.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here, and I appreciate the invitation and look forward to the time we spend together. And hi to all my former parishioners.
Yeah.
I can say honestly that you put all this gray hair on me.
And I think they're starting their work on me as well.
Watch out, man! It's coming.
That's right. That's right. We pass by your picture on Heritage Hall, every Sunday as we walk into the sanctuary. So you're still with us, No one's drawn a mustache on it or anything like that yet.
Give them time.
Well, it is so good to talk with you, Bill, and your book. I so enjoyed reading it, and I was a little bit, sometimes I wonder about what the benefit is for church lay folks to kind of get a peek under the hood of what life is like for ministers. But I think that your book has a lot of applicability to really all of us, because every single one of us at some point in our lives is most likely going to find ourselves in a season of wandering, a season of wilderness. And so I think it has a lot of good benefit for all of us. And it is an intensely personable book. In fact, those are the first words of the book. This story is intensely personal. There's a lot of wrapped up in those words. And so when you were writing the book, Bill, did you have any worries or concerns about telling such a personal story for your soul?
Well, I think first I was writing it for myself because writing is the way I process a lot of things. It's been an exercise of mine for my own spiritual development. Certainly, writing goes with the task of being a pastor. But in the aftermath of events, I felt like I needed to try to fit the pieces together, and writing was the mechanism that I had for that. But as I started, I think I began to jot down some other ideas, developed a little bit of an outline, and then I kind of ran it by Jenny and said, "What do you think about this?" And she said, "Hey, okay, this might be something really good." And so I floated the idea with an editor that I'd worked with at Smith and Hellwoods, and he really liked the idea because I sent him some samples of what I had already done. And so once you get into the process of writing, no matter if you started out for yourself or not, you get lost in that process. And as you well know, you go through a lot of drafts, rewrites, long process between even the end of my writing and the publication itself. And so when you get to that point, you're thinking, oh man, I'm just ready to be done with this thing. I've dealt with it forever and ever. And of course, when I turned it in, then I had that moment like, oh my God, what have I done? Um, I thought, gee whiz, I may have said too much, or uh, I'm leaving myself really wide open here
Mm.
for criticism, or maybe somebody will find something helpful in it. But I really think, Tyler, that um, if there's a value that I see in that, in saying, let me tell you a very intensely personal part of my story, I think it's important to manifest a little vulnerability.
Mm.
We do not tolerate a lot of weakness in our culture, and you know the Lord who saved me had a fascination for weak people, and so I count myself in that camp, and as I said, had some trepidation about doing that. But I also think, yeah, I didn't set out to write an expose on what it's like to be a pastor. But if other people can see what it's like, particularly these days, to see what's swirling around in the water for all pastors, hey, if it helps, I'm glad. Just grateful that I can make that contribution.
Mm. Yeah, I did think about the fact that how much the world has changed even since you probably submitted this manuscript.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And is there anything you would have changed, you think, about the book?
I think if I had the opportunity right now, I would add uh, a little bit more meat on the bone of how all of those events affected my family.
Mm.
It wasn't just me who went into the wilderness. Jenny and Mary Virginia went with me. Um, I dedicate the book to them because they never they never stopped believing in me. You
Mm.
know, I am loved. I'm well loved, and uh, I couldn't have asked for anything more. But it took a toll on them, and I think I would add something about that. I think as well, if I had the opportunity to reflect, I might have included something of an excursus or something where I just would plead for a little bit more understanding from people in the pew about just how hard it is to do this work. In my opinion, being a pastor is the last generalist position in this world. Um, we have to be pretty competent at a lot of things. Um, and we all have our strengths, we have our areas of giftedness. We also have the areas where we just know, hey, I got a blind spot, or this is just not in me. But you get judged on all of that. You get, performance rated on all of that. And when you add into the mix the fact that the culture in which we inhabit these days is so polarized, and people are so ready to storm the ramparts over everything, trying to hold a community of faith together, a community of different people together, man, that's a tall order. That's just a tall order. So um, you know, I love being a pastor. I have always loved being a pastor. Well, there were some days, but but uh, I just have enormous respect for pastors who do their work and do it well. I mean, it takes a lot of effort.
Well, it's clear in your book how much you love being a pastor because of how much that was tied to your identity. And you also talk a lot about in the book, you talk about how you felt like that at this point in your life before this wilderness time, that you had achieved a lot of what you consider to be success as a pastor.
Yes, yes.
And so, do you mind sharing a little bit about maybe your upbringing and what do you think are the things that led to you to define success in that way?
Well, my dad farmed, and my mother, um, she could have run her own business, but she devoted herself to uh, my sister and myself, and to also taking care of my dad. And but our family always had a very strong work ethic. Uh, from the earliest time, I can remember being given jobs, assignments, and things to do. And so working at things and accomplishing things was very much woven into my DNA. Um, Even when I play, I tend to work really hard at it. It's just not. Uh, so it's just been a part of me ever since, and I carried that over to how I channel myself in terms of my preparation for ministry, even the things that I did to try to continue learning as a minister. Um, you want to accomplish certain things, and that's a subtext of the title "Driven." Is that I'm driven to do that. I know that, and sometimes that can be very healthy because it allows you uh, to be focused and to do what needs to be done. It can also be unhealthy because you can get so driven that you neglect yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So you felt this kind of drive to always kind of seek after what's next, what's
Yes,
more to
yes,
achieve. Yeah.
yes. I I alluded to this way. I've done an awful lot in my life because I wasn't sure I could do it. And so I said, okay, I need to go find out if I can do this. And so, when I graduated from college, most of my classmates who were in ministry gravitated to New Orleans or to Southwestern. There are very few in our graduating class that went to Southern. And, I was drawn to Southern's reputation. I said, well, that's a different place. It's a whole different climate, whole different bunch of people. I'm not sure I can do that, so I need to go find out. And then that was a motivator along with my interest in New Testament in terms of saying, okay, maybe I should try to do graduate in this area. And I'm not sure I can do it, and still not sure, by the way. Uh, but you jump in and say, okay, can I cut it? And so it's always kind of been that challenge about that, and that goes along with the books I've written. I'm not sure I can do this, but I'm going to give it a shot, and let's try it and see.
So I want to ask about your experience of pastoring at Ardmore Baptist Church. And, you and I will try to keep the gossip to a minimum here.
Yes.
We are being recorded. So later we'll turn off the recording and then we'll really talk, but
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
But tell me about pastoring Ardmore. And one of the things that you specifically say, and you kind of allude to in the book about your time at Ardmore, is you feel like that there were, you wanted to be a change agent when you were at a church, but there also were seasons where you felt like you had become enmeshed in the status quo, is what you say,
Yes.
to the point where it sometimes felt for you difficult to advocate for change. And so
Yeah.
do you feel like you had any of that during your time at Ardmore? And what do you try to do with that now?
Okay. Well, there's seasons of that for every minister in every congregation. And the circumstances in which I came to Ardmore were rather unique. Um, JL, my predecessor, had died very unexpectedly. He had been there for 18 years. It was a real blow to the congregation. And the grief, even when I arrived, and it was nearly 3 years after his passing, the grief was still very, very palpable. And so when I arrived, on the one hand, there was this tremendous desire that we needed to deal with our facilities, that we needed to focus some of our energies in a particular direction. But there was also just the tug and pull of the recognition we're not over the fact that JL has died. We're not, I can remember vividly, and I've shared this on many occasions. I had been at Ardmore maybe a month or 6 weeks, and I forget who it was. Some dear lady in the congregation came up to me one Sunday and said, "Oh, I just knew it was God's will for you to be here." And I said, "Oh, well, thank you. Why? Why do you say that?" She said, "You're left-handed, just like JL was." And so I thought, okay, uh, we still have some things to do. So on the one hand, trying to be to honor JL's tremendous legacy and to help people recognize that he was a fine pastor and a wonderful pastor. I'm not JL. There are things that we have to do, and at the same time, trying to push things and move them forward. And it's a balancing act. And as you said, you run through seasons where you feel like I am really caught up in this system, and I need to find some new levers. I need to do some things that will kind of get things unstuck. And uh, some of those I think I did pretty well. Then some they just they went down in flames. And but that's just the way it works. As you know, every system has a center of gravity, and there's always a desire just to suck you down to that center of gravity. And I've said this again in other places, and I think I said it Ardmore. Everybody is for change as long as everything remains the same. And so, we really need to change. We need to be transformed. And all I can say is that takes hard work and it's costly. And so the chances are you don't mean but maybe 1 or 2% of what you're saying. Because as I read the Gospels and as I read about being a disciple, it's not an overnight kind of deal. You have to grow into being like Jesus. And I don't know about you, Tyler, but I did not come out of the womb already well formed in his image like that. I mean, I got tons of rough edges that still need to be whacked off and sanded down. And that's a painful process. And so for a church to say we want to grow into our mission, we want to develop, I have to say, well, are you prepared to do the work that requires? Mm. And sadly, this is true of all systems. The inertia is just there. It just sucks you down. So,
yeah.
I don't know that I answered that fully or not, or whether you got a sermon there or something.
But it was a good sermon. It was a good sermon.
Let's take up the collection and
That's
see
right. Please start just as I am.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So you talk about this in the book, and when you were leaving Ardmore, you went to Georgia.
Yes.
And tell me about your experience of being called to Dalton, because the sense that I get from your book is that if I were to talk to Bill Ireland in those years, Bill Ireland would be as sure as the sky is blue that this is what I'm supposed to do.
It came about that way. As I mentioned in the book, we thought the time had come that we needed to consider other opportunities. And there were some that had been kind of in the water at different points, but none of them really came to fruition. There were a couple several years in that came our way, and Jenny and I just said it's not right. It's not the appropriate time. We're still not done here. But the way in which the call from Dalton came, it was so out of the blue for us. And at least in my experience, my calls have generally come like that. My calls to congregations, it's sort of been, I'm looking over here and then something over here pops up. And for example, I did not know that members of their pastor search team had been at our church for like 2 or 3 times. I had just never noticed or made any kind of connection at all. And so I can remember vividly. I was driving home from church one day, and I got a phone call out of the blue, and it was the chair of the committee, and said, "We're really interested in you. We've been at your church 2 or 3 times, and would you be interested in having a conversation with us?" And I was kind of, whoa, where did this come from? And so that plus the conversations that we had with the members of the search team, are going back into the area. Um, it really had all of the earmarks for us. I can remember as well, Tyler, we went on vacation that summer, and we took an extended vacation because part of our task was Mary Virginia was getting ready to be a senior in high school, and it was let's go visit colleges time. And we had a list of them that we were visiting while we were on vacation. And uh, we'd already had some conversation, and we remember very distinctly crossing from South Carolina into Georgia. And Jenny and I just had this sensation of we're home, we're home. And subsequent to that, Mary Virginia made her initial visit at Mercer, and immediately there was a connection and a draw there. And so we started trying to process that and put that together. And of course, when the call came, we just said, "Yeah, this is the right move." And for Mary Virginia, her senior year, to say, I can remember her at the supper table one evening saying, "If you're going, I'm going."
Mm.
And as I write in the book, she went, and it was a rich, rich experience for her. Wouldn't change any of that. So it was a very solid sense. And as I said, it started well, but uh, it just didn't work. It just didn't work. And I think the thing that the takeaway there is that even when God is in it, there's no guarantee that everything is going to turn out well.
Mm.
There are always bumps in the road, hiccups, obstacles. You just never know what's coming. And that's what happened.
Don't you think that there's so much theology in especially American evangelicalism that we subscribe we marry together success and the presence of God.
Oh, yeah.
And so therefore, if something is quote unquote successful, God must be in it. And if something is unsuccessful, God must not have actually ordained this.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
it
Yeah.
sounds like that, as you look back on those years, you hold together, this didn't work out, and God was leading me to this moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can also say, yeah, I've bought into that for years. God's in it. It's successful. Well, not always.
Mm.
Uh, you like to think that, but that's not reality. There are too many people who are very, very faithful and who serve God extraordinarily well. And their lives are just an absolute mess. And it's not necessarily because they're bad people or they've done something terribly wrong. It's just the circumstances in which they live.
Mm.
I mean, good Lord. Uh, a faithful person is not guaranteed to have a blanket of insulation wrapped around their lives where everything works just the way they think it should. It's just not going to happen.
Do you think it is possible? I guess what I'm asking is, do you think it is possible to know that without experiencing a season like a wilderness season?
I think you can say it, but until you live it, I mean,
Yeah.
that was my story. I went through life relatively unscathed. I mean, I was blessed, um, and I never saw this one coming. Just
Mm,
never saw it. And the way it all unfolded, uh, I railed at it. Uh, you know, uh, I did everything I knew to do, and nothing worked.
yeah.
And that was new for me.
Yeah.
I mean, that uh, I can remember vividly. Um, I think it was December of 2019, and we had just we had moved to Knoxville. Jenny had started her work as a hospice chaplain, and uh, she'd been up here about a year. I'd gotten the house sold, and we moved into Knoxville, and I'm sitting there in my study, and I'm you know trying to figure out what to do, and reviewing the list of everything that I'd tried, and I remember just breaking down. I said, I don't know what you want of me. I don't know what the answer to this is. Um, I'm just at a loss,
Mm,
and um, I have never had to cope with that.
mm,
Never had to cope with it, and I'm grateful that I have the gift. My family instilled it in me. I think I have a good bit of resiliency. Uh, I think as well that one of my saving graces, even though some people would say it's warped, I have a sense of humor. And there are just moments that if you can't laugh at some of the crap that you're experiencing, you just you're just going to go crazy. It just there were just times where Jenny and I would just say, no, well, we just got to laugh.
yeah.
Just
Yep.
one comedian wrote a book years ago, said God said ha. That's kind of what we thought. Yeah, God said ha.
Yeah. Goodness. Um, so the title of the book comes
Yes,
from the Greek word for
yes,
well, you describe the meaning of the Greek word for driven, which
yes,
I am not as Greek scholar as you are, but ekbale, is that
yes,
all
yes.
right? Do I get an A on that, Professor?
I'll turn you over to David May. And
Oh, okay. Would you? Would you?
yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. I don't think you might have more grace than David May, um, so the Greek word for driven is the word
Yes,
ekbale, and
yes,
what part of what I can sometimes struggle with is wrestling with the questions about whether our hard seasons in life are just naturally occurring or whether they are caused by God. Sometimes, I'm hesitant to say this, but it can feel at times like God is testing us. And as you think about your experience of being driven, were there ever moments where you wrestled with that as well? Did I cause this? Is God doing this to me? How'd you feel about kind of your own agency and God's agency and where those fit together?
I don't think God did any of this to me. I really don't. Um, I think it was a culmination of what I had experienced and what I was observing in current church culture that was certainly a part of it. And then I was in a place where it just didn't work. And so I never, to say that um, God did this to me, that's awfully close to what you find in those opening chapters of Job, where God and Satan just kind of had this little deal going. Let's just have a little side bet about how much Job can take before he cusses you out and blasphemes you. And I have a hard time believing that God is trying to mess with me like that or mess with anybody like that. I mean, I think, yes, there are circumstances that emerge that require us to take stock of our faith. But to say for God to be wherever God is and saying, I haven't really found out a whole lot about Tyler lately. I think I'm just going to really screw up his life for a while just to see if he's really faithful. Surely God already knows what level of faithfulness we have and what's in our heart, what's in our spirit. But by the same token, I can say that some of the things that led me to walk away were indeed inspired by the Spirit. I was increasingly uncomfortable with what I saw as church in North America. And I felt like the expression of church that was predominant, no matter what stripe or flavor it is, I just felt like there had to be more to it. And so that part of it was Spirit inspired. The fact that I was very intrigued and interested by some opportunities that came my way, even while I was a pastor. I think those were moments where the Spirit was at work in my life saying, this restlessness that you're experiencing, there's something there you need to explore. So that is a part of the push or the drive. Obviously, I draw from Mark's gospel. Mark is very straightforward to the point. The Spirit jerks Jesus up from the waters of baptism and throws him out of the wilderness. We don't have a lot of reflection there. That's just not Mark's style. So we're left to kind of hang in that. He leaves no doubt that it's the work of the Spirit. But still, I think, what I take from that, all of the temptation narratives, is that anytime any of us assert who we are, or we try to claim this is who God says I am, whenever we do that, we immediately face a test. Okay, this is who you say you are. Now, how are you going to be that? What shape does that take? Now, if you are really the Son of God, or if you're really a follower of Jesus, if that's the claim, then how are you going to live that out? That's always the immediate aftermath of any kind of declaration of identity. You know this well, Tyler, from church life. You can say, this is who we are as a church. Then the immediate question is, well, what does that mean? What do we do with that? And so there's a sense in which the Spirit is always driving and pushing us in that respect. That's the challenge these days for all of us as church, to be thinking, okay, what does it mean to be the body of Christ today? And if we take that identity seriously, then what do we do with that? Those are twin moves that I think are intertwined by the working of the Spirit. I really hope I got out of that alive. I wondered about that. That may be a little too long. Okay. Can you hear me okay? My family is giving me a high sign that they're having a hard time hearing me.
I can hear you okay, but there are a couple comments on Facebook that people are having trouble hearing. So that might be their device that you might need to turn the volume up, but I can hear you okay. But again, I'm wearing headphones. So.
Okay, well, my volume is all the way up. So.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, I meant the volume on their device. Yeah. Yep. So we will try our best, but I want to, I don't want either of us to get in trouble here, but I want to explore a little bit of what you said about the discomfort you were feeling with
Yeah.
church in North America.
Yes.
Because, part of what we're seeing is we're seeing more and more people who are leaving churches. And we who have a love for the church and we who have a deep desire to see the church be faithful to God's mission, um, I think this is a time for introspection, for wondering, what are these things that are causing discomfort in people? And so, do you mind sharing a little bit about that? What were those things you were seeing in North American churches that were causing this holy restlessness in you?
Well, thank you for asking that because that's a big part of it. Um, I'll start by saying I think that people are staying away, tuning out from church because we're not living what we say we believe. Uh, if we're supposed to love each other and love our neighbor, well, that ain't happening in a lot of places. And what I mean by love is the willingness to act in someone's interest, even if it is costly to you. That's my understanding of God's kind of love. And we don't have a whole lot of that going around in the church. At least as I see it. I, that's a real broad brush, Tyler, and I don't want to indict everybody, but that plus the fact that uh, we have this preoccupation with being able to measure everything, and if you can put people in the pews, you can get money in the plate, and you can quantify how many people you have ministered to, well, then that quote unquote makes you successful or that makes you effective. Well, and all of that has to be managed. Well, the difficult thing there is that oftentimes what we do is we confuse managing the church with serving the kingdom of God. We think that if we have done our time on this committee or that committee, that we have done a great thing for the kingdom. And I'm not denigrating people's investment for that. I mean, God knows I just relied on that. There were so many people who were so much smarter about that stuff than I ever was. But nonetheless, it is easy for the tail to wag the dog with that. And what happens is we can get so caught up in the business aspect of it that we forget that we're supposed to be a community of faith. And it means that we're to take each other seriously, and it means that we're trying to take seriously what God is not only doing in my life but in the life of my neighbor. And how do we work together so that can be nurtured between us? I quote Eugene Peterson, who said that the pastor's primary responsibility is to keep the church attentive to God. Well, we can say that, but in a lot of places, um, um, as one of my colleagues said, I'm like a head coach for a college football team. I'm only as good as how many wins I have. And I understand that,
Yeah.
but man, um, and I also want to say, I get that, but it's like me saying, I can go tell Nick Saban how he can be a better coach. I want to say, if you think you can do the job better than I, come give it a shot. You won't last a week, okay? You will not last a week. So I'm sorry. You know, I'm in your corner, Tyler. That's the way it is.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have done it that way, or I wouldn't have said that. Well, or I read this book. Well, great. Congratulations. You're an expert. I only invested 8 or 12 years of my life trying to learn how to do this, and I'm still learning. So, so that's part of the restlessness. I see this deal about it. We've turned it into this spiritual experience. I give my life to Jesus, and we think that's it, and we forget that it's I give my life to Jesus. And so whether I teach school, or I'm an attorney, or I'm a physician, or I clean hallways and bathrooms, what does it look like for me to be Jesus in that context? And I you know, I got lost. I got lost trying to find that. Uh, as I mentioned in the book, to have someone inquire of me, can you help me with my prayer life? That was all too infrequent. Instead, it was more, we got a budget problem we need to fix. Okay, we've got some personnel issues that we have to deal with, and uh, so it can really get where we're just so inwardly focused that we forget what our calling is and what we're supposed to be in this world.
Mm.
And so anyway, I'm not sure I answered that well, but I love the church.
That's clear.
I love the church. I have served some wonderful congregations, and by and large, a lot of those congregations gave me far more than I gave them. And I have a rich treasure trove of memories of experiences where I saw those churches express the fullness of the kingdom of God. And it was, you just think, gosh, this is just fabulous. And sometimes we just lose sight of that. May I tell you a story on that score?
Please.
Okay.
Please.
I was a student pastor, and I can remember that we had some guys in the church that said we're gonna remodel the kitchen in the church basement. Well, they started trying to remodel the kitchen, and I came down, and then these two guys almost they're about to kill each other. It was just awful. And so they just, I thought I'll never get these people back together again. And it was acrimony, just hard, terrible. Well, one of those guys, his wife dies. And a couple of weeks after she dies, I come out in the sanctuary for the service, and I look, and these two guys, they're sitting together. Mm. Because the other guy whose wife hadn't died, he realizes that could be me. And yeah, we had some words and we almost came to blows, but by golly, he's my brother and I'm going to take care of him. And I thought, all I need to do is just point to y'all, and that's the sermon.
Where else but the church?
Yeah, where else you going to find that?
Yeah.
And from your own experience, you got stories like that you could tell. And so you see so much that is so wonderfully potential. And you think if we could just push aside some of this other extraneous stuff and say, what does Jesus want us to do here? Period. And that's it.
It really is that simple. Yeah.
Well, I won't go down that road. So.
Well, let me ask this. This experience of we've been talking a lot about ministry and pastoring, but I know that part of your heart is also.
Hold on a minute, Tyler.
Absolutely.
My daughter's going to adjust this for me.
Well, hope that helps with some of the sound stuff. So
just show me. This is invisible hand coming in.
Well, I'll take a moment to say that we do have a number of people joining us on Facebook, and if you have any questions you want to ask, feel free in the comments to ask those, and I'll ask them of Dr. Ireland. So feel free to type those in.
Okay. Maybe that's better.
That's way better. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well done, Mary, Virginia.
Yeah.
So now would you please just repeat everything you said the past 45
Absolutely.
minutes?
Absolutely. I would just love Jesus. Okay. I'm so sorry, Tyler.
That's
You know,
okay.
I'm a technological idiot,
Sure.
Yeah.
That's all right. But yes, that does sound way better. But if you later on, if you were having sound issues, I think if you'll go back and watch the recording and turn the volume pretty high up, you should be able to hear Dr. Ireland's stuff. So thank you very much. But okay, here's a question I want to ask.
Sure.
We've been talking a lot about ministry and pastoring, and what I'm curious about is I'm thinking about folks that really you and I both love, who I know are going through very different kinds of seasons of wilderness as well. Maybe they have a diagnosis that they've recently received, or they're estranged from someone in their family, or they've lost somebody recently, or they've lost their job, or quite honestly, they're just in a funk and they can't point to some direct reason why.
Yes.
So how has your experience, do you think, how has it changed the way that you view that experience in other people's lives, and how would you care for them differently now?
Well, great questions. I think I have a little bit better understanding of what it is like for people to be in those kinds of extreme situations. There's never any one-to-one correspondence between what I experience and what you experience. Everyone's is different. But hopefully there's enough commonality that we enlarge our capacity to empathize, to make that leap to say, if I were in your shoes, man, that's got to be hard. That's really got to be tough. And so instead of perhaps being inclined to judge someone or to make an assessment of what they did or did not do, can say, wow, you just never know what's going to come, and you never know how it's going to hit you or what's going to happen. I think the other part of that, Tyler, is that hopefully I have learned to ask better questions of the people in terms of what they're experiencing. At Georgetown, one of the acronyms we had was WAIT, W-A-I-T, which simply meant, why am I talking? And the presupposition of that is, my task is to ask questions to get you talking so that you can process your experience and learn from it or get through it somehow. If I'm talking, I'm not honoring your space and I'm not honoring your experience. So I hope as a result of this, I've learned to ask some better questions.
I think too that I remember hearing a deacon at my former church say that a former pastor had told him once he had gone through a divorce. This deacon had gone through a divorce, and he was so heartbroken by this. It was not his choice. It happened to him. And the pastor said, one day, someone is going to come into your life who is going through what you have been through. And you will be the only person God has equipped in their life who can speak to that experience.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. While I was there, we had a family that had a crisis, and the husband was left, and this deacon came alongside this guy and cared for him and loved him. And so I think God does that as well. As I think the brokenness that we carry in our stories one day will be used to help bring healing and hope to somebody else as well.
Yes. Well, you asked at the outset about the intensely personal nature of the story.
No.
Years and years ago, I read something by Rabbi Kushner, who said that when we lead with our strengths, we create competition. When we lead with our weaknesses or our hurts, we create friendships. We create the connection. And so my task or my aim in writing was to say to other people, maybe you don't have words for what your wilderness looks like. And if I can supply some of those words,
Oh, yeah.
I'm grateful. You don't have to be a minister, because everybody winds up in a wilderness where nothing makes sense, and up is down and down is up.
Yeah.
And so if I can help someone better articulate that, then I've done my job, and it was worth the experience.
Yeah. Isn't that what those psalms of lament and complaint are? They give language for when we feel just absolutely broken and we have no words for it. Yeah.
I'm with you. Have great insight. Yeah.
Well, we have a couple of people who have asked questions on Facebook. And so David Wright asked, he says on page 84, you say, quote, it's always dangerous when someone quotes your words back to you, but
Jenny wrote that part. I didn't.
Oh, okay. All right. That makes it, yeah. On page 84, you say this, quote, I am convinced we could do a better job of being church if we could be honest. And he asked, would you like to expand on that?
Sure. We often come to church to leave people with an impression that we hope they'll accept of who we are. We routinely ask people, how you doing? And we always expect someone to say, I'm just fine. How about a Sunday school class where somebody shows up and they're not fine? And is that okay? Or do we try to paper over it or gloss over it? Or why don't we say, I got a lot more questions than I have answers? Why don't we say, I really have a struggle with this in my life and I need your help? And we don't do that. Many people that I have been associated with who have been a part of AA will often say that their real sanctuary is in the confines of an AA group where you have to tell the truth about yourself. And we don't do that very often in church. I'm not advocating that every church become a therapy group, but I am saying that it is important for us just simply to be honest about our struggles or about what's good or what we discover or even where we have questions. I don't know that I answered David's question, but I'll stick to that.
Yeah, thank you. One of our church members, Andy Ray, asked this. He says, hello, Dr. Ireland. Could you share your thoughts between restlessness and boredom?
That's a great question. And I'll take a stab at an answer. I don't know if I have one that's fully formed or even accurate. For me, restlessness has always been a good thing. I just am interested in what could happen or what's next, or in personal terms, don't be content. Try to push to be better. The downside of restlessness is that you can lose your center. You can get so busy trying to accomplish or do that you lose sight of who you are as a person. Boredom, on the other hand, I think is dangerous. Because when we're bored, I think that's when we often open the door for things that might be unhealthy to enter into our lives, because we want to fill up that boredom. And our culture thrives on that. Everything that happens has to be bigger and better than whatever was before. You know, the Olympics are going to begin in what, a week, 10 days, something like that. And the opening ceremony, I just get the impression that every country, every host city is trying to say, we're going to raise the bar. And so that the next city or country that hosts the Olympics has to spend way more money and try to do way more stuff to top what we did. And we crave that kind of stimulation. And so that kind of boredom is not good. I think maybe the kind of boredom that says maybe I just need to stop and sit down or take a nap, that might be pretty good. But both, I guess, could be double-edged swords. I'm kind of processing this as I think about it. So I'm not sure that's a great answer, but it's the best I got on the spur of the moment.
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're nearing the end of our time, and I have lots more questions, but you know, I want to honor your time and everyone else's time as well. So I really want to ask, I think it's kind of a rare opportunity, frankly, to be addressing a former congregation in this way.
Sure.
And so I wonder, just, you know, I wasn't planning on asking this, but is there anything you just want to say to Ardmore Baptist Church?
Oh, listen, y'all were so good to us while we were there. But two really important things stand out in recent history that were such good gifts to us. The church was gracious enough to invite Jenny and me back when the church burned the note on the new sanctuary and educational space. And the response that day, that was, we knew we were getting ready to make the announcement that we were walking away. And the response of the congregation that day was exactly what we needed. We were in tears. We had just, we needed the lift and the encouragement. It was nice. Nice is such a negative, it was a glorious thing to be affirmed in that way. And that was a gift. And then prior to Don's departure, I had a conversation with him and said to him, just in no uncertain terms, I said, look, I'm out of line here, and you can tell me so, and it's fine. But I said, there are a lot of people that I had the privilege of serving in that church that are getting older now. And I said, if you ever have an occasion that you'd welcome me back, I would love to just try to bless those folks. And that was on the docket. And Don felt he needed to do otherwise and had resigned from the church. And I came in, I guess, about 4 or 5 months after he had done that. And again, it was the experience of feeling like I had something that I hoped I could offer something that would be helpful to the church in that moment. And at the same time, again, just having the response that we did. I mean, I preached in Birkenstocks and a coat and tie because, you know, Birkenstocks were the only thing that made my broken ankle feel worth anything at that point in time. That's probably a first for Ardmore, you know, but, you know, we just, again, were overwhelmed by the response and the affirmation. And man, that was really when it was getting dark for us, and we needed it. And so Jenny and I, Mary V, we will always be indebted to the gifts of the congregation that y'all have given us. It was a pleasure, a privilege, and honor to serve the church. we love what Ardmore represents. We love the people there. Always have and always will. So Mary V grew up there. Don't believe half of what they say about her. But we had a rich experience there.
Yeah.
So
and you and I are, we're in a small club.
Yeah.
We had this experience of loving these people from this seat, and and I think we both do.
Yeah.
And so it's a privilege. It is such a blessing. It's a wonderful, wonderful congregation, and we're just a couple of dumb hicks from Mississippi and Missouri.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's all right. That means we're relatable.
That's right.
But this is an honor for me. If there are more questions, if you need to do a part 2, I'm up for it.
We'll make sure your Zoom volume is up for that. Yeah.
Well, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It happens. Technology in this day and age. And so if anybody is, just dying from curiosity and they couldn't hear the first part, I'm sure they can get a hold of you. And
tell them to send me an email. I'll be glad to answer the question again.
But Bill, do you mind to end our time with a benediction?
Oh, I'd be honored. So again, thank you, Tyler. This has been a real blessing to me. But my dear brothers and sisters, please know how wonderfully gifted and blessed you are to be together. And in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, may you extend the blessings of God's kingdom everywhere you are. And may God show you the best way through your wilderness, whatever it may be. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Bill. So good to see you, friend.
Thanks, buddy. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.